Twilight of Democracy, The Seductive Lure of Authoritarianism by Applebaum explores the rise of authoritarian politics in the 21st century, focusing on how democracy has faced significant challenges and how some intellectuals, politicians, and ordinary people have been seduced by authoritarian ideologies. Applebaum, a historian and journalist, draws on her personal experiences, particularly in Poland, where she lived and worked in the early 2000s, to investigate the decline of democratic institutions across the world. Overview of the book. Applebaum's book is both a personal and analytical account of how political landscapes have shifted in recent years. The central theme is that democracy, despite its many successes, is in decline, and authoritarianism is on the rise in many parts of the world, including Europe and the United States. She discusses how democracy's erosion is not solely the result of mass populism or economic crises, but also a product of intellectual and social shifts, often led by people who once championed democratic ideals. Applebaum begins by addressing the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe and the subsequent democratic movements of the 1990s. She paints an optimistic picture of the period, with former dissidents now in power, and a belief in liberal democracy at its peak. However, this optimism was short-lived, as she points out that in the following decades, many of these same individuals began to embrace nationalism, authoritarianism, and the idea that the liberal order had failed. The Rise of Authoritarianism. The book is not simply a catalog of political trends. It's an exploration of how authoritarianism has become appealing to many people who once fought for democratic freedoms. Applebaum draws on her personal relationships with former friends and colleagues to highlight how they shifted their views and embraced populist, nationalist politics. This personal perspective is important because it adds a sense of urgency and intimacy to the discussion. One of Applebaum's most powerful arguments is that authoritarianism does not merely arise from a vacuum. It is often supported by a mix of intellectuals, politicians, and media figures who provide ideological justification for the erosion of democratic norms. She reflects on how figures like Viktor Orban in Hungary, Jarosław Kaczynski in Poland, and Donald Trump in the United States have used populist rhetoric to cultivate a following that is skeptical of traditional democratic institutions and values. Applebaum observes that these leaders appeal to people's fears: fear of immigration, fear of globalization, and fear of losing national identity. They offer simple solutions to complex problems, often in the form of strong leadership, and promise to restore a sense of national pride and security. This message resonates with people who feel disenfranchised and alienated by modernity and globalization. In discussing the allure of authoritarianism, Applebaum also explores how some intellectuals who had once supported democracy were drawn to authoritarian ideas. She discusses the ways in which these former proponents of freedom were enticed by the apparent clarity and decisiveness of authoritarian rule. Intellectuals like the Polish writer and philosopher Ryszard Legutko, who once fought against communism, became advocates for a non-liberal order, rejecting Western liberalism as a form of oppression. Media and the erosion of truth. A key theme in Twilight of Democracy is the role of media in shaping the political climate. Applebaum argues that the erosion of truth and the rise of alternative facts play a significant role in the rise of authoritarianism. She discusses the way in which social media, traditional media, and political elites use misinformation to manipulate public opinion. The deliberate spread of fake news and conspiracy theories has undermined the public's ability to discern truth from falsehood, making it easier for authoritarian leaders to maintain power by distorting reality. Applebaum also looks at the role of the press in weakening democratic institutions. In many countries, media outlets that once operated as watchdogs of democracy have become complicit in spreading the populist message. Some outlets, including state-run media in Hungary and Poland, have aligned themselves with the authoritarian regimes they once criticized. In this environment, it becomes increasingly difficult for people to trust the information they receive and make informed decisions at the ballot box. Populism and nationalism. Populism, according to Applebaum, is deeply intertwined with nationalism. She examines how populist leaders use nationalist rhetoric to create a sense of us versus them. This framing is a powerful tool for dividing societies and turning public sentiment against outgroups, such as immigrants, ethnic minorities, and political opponents. Populist rhetoric often portrays elites as corrupt and out of touch with the needs of the common people, while the authoritarian leader is presented as the only one who understands the people's needs and can act decisively. Applebaum provides a detailed analysis of how nationalism has gained traction in countries that were once seen as paragons of liberal democracy, such as Poland and Hungary. In these countries, authoritarian leaders have successfully combined nationalism with populism, creating a political climate where dissent is increasingly marginalized. Nationalist narratives are used to justify policies that undermine democratic norms, such as restrictions on the judiciary, attacks on the press, and crackdowns on political opposition. The fragmentation of society. Another critical aspect of Applebaum's analysis is the fragmentation of society. She describes how political polarization and social division have deepened in many countries, particularly in Europe and the United States. This polarization has made it more difficult for people to come together around shared democratic values. Instead of finding common ground, people are increasingly defined by their political affiliations and ideological differences. Applebaum argues that the rise of populism and authoritarianism has further fractured societies by turning political debates into existential struggles. In this environment, people view political opponents not just as adversaries, but as enemies who threaten the very fabric of society. This intense polarization makes it easier for authoritarian leaders to justify undemocratic measures, as they frame them as necessary for protecting the nation from internal and external threats. The future of democracy. In the final chapters of Twilight of Democracy, Applebaum reflects on the future of democracy. While she is deeply concerned about the rise of authoritarianism, she also expresses hope that democratic institutions and norms can still be defended. She believes that while democracy is facing significant challenges, it is not doomed. However, she warns that defending democracy will require a concerted effort from political leaders, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens who are committed to upholding the values of liberal democracy. Applebaum also emphasizes the importance of solidarity across borders in resisting authoritarianism. She argues that the fight for democracy is not limited to any single country or region, but is a global struggle. She urges readers to remain vigilant and to push back against authoritarianism whenever and wherever it arises. The defense of democracy, she believes, requires both action and commitment, as well as a renewed understanding of what democracy means and why it matters. Twilight of Democracy is a powerful, sobering examination of the state of democracy in the modern world. Through a combination of personal reflection, historical analysis, and political commentary, Applebaum explores how democracy has been weakened and how authoritarianism has gained a foothold in many countries. She provides a thorough and thoughtful analysis of the forces at work in this decline, from media manipulation and populism to nationalism and political polarization. At the same time, Applebaum offers a hopeful call to action, urging individuals and societies to defend the principles of liberal democracy before it is too late. This book serves as both a warning and a rallying cry for those who care about the future of democracy.